Thank you. Hello, Sioux City. Thanks for giving me the warm, and I do mean warm, welcome. Makes me feel right at home. And thanks so much to North High School for hosting us. Big thank you to J.D. Schulten. I'm not sure what his plans are, but I know that Washington could use a few more people like him. Just putting that out there. Thanks to Dr. Joshua Merchant, president of Buena Vista University. Thank you to Christy for your introduction and for your work with Big Brothers Big Sisters. Mentoring works. It is one of the best things you can do to make your community better. We set up, one of the first things we did in South Bend was set out to double the number of mentors that we had in our community. It makes a huge difference and it lasts a lifetime. So thanks for what you've done to build up that organization and those service opportunities. So my name is Pete Buttigieg. Around South Bend, most people just call me Mayor Pete. I'm running for president, and I want to tell you a little bit about what I believe, why I think we need something completely different, and what that has to do with service on the eve of the 4th of July. Part of why I'm running is because of the seriousness of the moment we're living in. I think even now it's possible that we are underreacting, because what's happening right now is more than just a single presidency. It is the beginning of a new era. And it has not yet been decided whether that era will be enlightened or whether it'll be ugly. That's going to be up to us. And I think at a moment like that, it calls for a different kind of leadership. It calls for a different kind of message. And I'm here to make the case that there's no going back. It's something I learned in my own hometown, an industrial Midwestern city that found a way to a different future and stands as living proof that there is no such thing as an honest politics built around the word again. You just got to look forward. That's South Bend's story. And I think we got to remember that looking at 2020, because I think it's probably fair to say most of us here are Democrats. But I travel to some places where people have trouble believing that Trump voters exist. And I think those of us who may be Democrats or Democrat-leading independents or Republicans of conscience, we don't support this president, but we know people who do. Trump voters are not an exotic species, right? In our part of the country, there are people we talk to all the time. They get that look in their eyes, and you realize they're going to vote that way. And the reason it's so important to think about that is that this president could win again. He is deservedly unpopular, but he could win again. And I think he wins again if we look like we're offering more of the same. I think the way he wins again is if we look like we're the defenders of a system that hasn't worked. And what that means is, surprisingly, the riskiest thing we could do is try so hard to play it safe that we continue to walk down an establishment path that has Americans believing that we're not speaking to them. It's why we've got to do something different. A president like the one we've got now does not get within cheating distance of the Oval Office unless something is wrong in our economy and in our politics. We've got to demonstrate that we get that, and we're going to answer those changes that are accelerating in our time, make sure they work for us instead of the other way around. We've got to make life more secure in this country, because countries are like people. We are at our worst when we are insecure. So we've got to make sure we're speaking to those basic needs folks have, and that means coming up with something completely different. And that's where I come in. See, what could be more different from this president than a guy like me? Laid back, middle class, millennial mayor from the industrial Midwest. It's not traditional, but I think a mayor offers something unique at a time when we need to get Washington to start looking more like our best-run cities instead of the other way around. And I think it also makes sense to put forward somebody who's confronted the challenges facing diverse, low-income, and struggling communities in the heartland. And I also think it's not the worst idea to send somebody in who represents a new generation of leadership in our time. I belong to a generation that is the most diverse yet in American history and has a lot on the line in our future. I came home from high school one day and saw the Columbine shootings on TV. Became part of what is now the first school shooting generation. And the generation that's going to be dealing with climate change for the majority of our adult lives. We're the generation that, if nothing changes, would be the first in American history to earn less than our parents. So we got to make sure things change and things change quick. My goal is that we make decisions in 2020, 2021, 2022 that will set us up well for 2055. That's the year that, God willing, I will come to the current age of the current president. And I want to be able to look back on where we are right now and say that these were the years when we changed the channel in American politics away from that show that's going on to something completely different. Now, in order to do that, well, we've got to anchor everything we have to say in our deepest values. The more of a crisis we're in, the more we got to fall back on the values that motivate us. And that's why, as those signs say, which I love, freedom, security, and democracy is our answer to those who say Democrats don't know how to put our values on a bumper sticker. Sure we do. And those are our values. And don't let anybody tell you those are conservative values. They are American values. But we got to help people see the big picture around freedom, that there's more to freedom than just freedom from a regulation or a tax somewhere, that it's about freedom to live a life of meaning, freedom to live a life of your choosing. That's why health care is freedom, because you're not free if you're afraid to go start a small business, because that would mean leaving your old job and that would mean losing your health care. Health care is absolutely part of American freedom. And so, by the way, is reproductive health care for women who shouldn't be ordered what to do by government. I think freedom comes by way of organizing, which is why we ought to support organized labor and lifting living standards for the American people. And freedom comes by way of education, which is why one of the first things the new president's got to do, one of the first things I will do in the Oval Office, is appoint a Secretary of Education who believes in public education. So don't let them tell you freedom's a conservative value. It's an American value that has progressive implications, and the same thing is true about security. By the way, do we have any veterans in the house? All right. Thank you for serving. I've studied a few languages, and I'm pretty sure one of those languages I learned how to speak a little bit is Marine, and I heard a little bit of a strong Marine accent from that side of the room. So thanks to everybody who served. And, when you serve, when you go into a conflict zone with a flag on your shoulder, it's not a Republican flag or a Democrat flag. It is an American flag, signifying, among other things, the idea that you can criticize your own leadership and no one will question your loyalty to the republic for which it stands. On that note, I feel like I got to say something about this parade that's going on in Washington tomorrow. I love the 4th of July. And I'm a mayor, so of course I love a good parade. In fact, I'll be in the Storm Lake Parade tomorrow. I don't know if anybody else here is going to that, but I'm excited to see that for myself. But this business of diverting money and military assets to use them as a kind of prop, to prop up a presidential ego, is not reflecting well on our country. One of the reasons I joined the military was to do my small part in order to make sure my country that I lived in was not the kind of place where the fragile ego of a strongman leader made it necessary for him to feel like he had to roll tanks down the streets of the capital city. It's not a show of strength, it's a show of insecurity. Think about this. Think about the strongest, toughest person that you know. Picture that person. I bet you it's not the kind of person who goes around talking about how strong and tough they are. And every time the president has our country looking like the chest-thumping loudmouth at the end of the bar, it makes us all look smaller. Our country's bigger than that. I believe in this country, and we're way bigger than our president's making us look at a time like this. So it's a good time for our country and our party to talk about security in a new way. And that means recognizing that 21st century security is going to be a little different. It includes things like cybersecurity and election security. Security means dealing with violent white nationalism that has claimed lives in this country and overseas. It means finding a way to honor the Second Amendment without letting it become a death sentence for thousands of Americans every year, which we can do. And I don't have to lecture a river community in Iowa about how climate disruption is a security issue in our time. Now, good news is most Americans are with us on all of this. Most Americans agree with us on these issues. There's just a small matter of making sure that our democratic republic reflects the will of the American people. And that's where democracy comes in, because our democracy is struggling a little bit right now. It's struggling because districts are drawn to where politicians are picking their voters instead of the other way around. It's struggling because some Americans, U.S. citizens in D.C. or Puerto Rico, don't enjoy the same political representation as the rest of us. It's struggling at the hands of a Supreme Court that's starting to look like a nakedly political body. And we can fix all of that. I'd argue we might even go so far in a democracy as to pick our president by just counting up all the votes and giving it to the person who got the most. But even with all those reforms, there's something else we've got to do for our democracy, and that's why I'm here to talk about service. It's that faith in our institutions is near record lows. 6 in 10 Americans or less express trust in their fellow Americans. And we have got to knit back the American fabric quickly if we want our democracy to work. When I was overseas in uniform, biggest thing I learned was how to put my faith in people who were completely different from me. The military that I was part of drew on people from every part of the country, people with different views, different backgrounds. It was the most racially integrated organization I've ever been part of. And there were some people there who we basically had nothing in common except the fact that we were American. But every one of the 119 times I found myself going outside the wire, driving or guarding a vehicle, I was with people who were trusting me with their lives, and I was doing the same. And they did not care if I was a Democrat or a Republican. They did not care if I was going home. Did not care if I was going home to a girlfriend or a boyfriend. Did not care what country my dad immigrated from. They just cared that I knew how to do my job. Because we all wanted to get home safe. And so what's been on my mind is that life-changing experience of mine is one that I wish more Americans had. But I don't think you ought to have to go to war in order to have that experience. The question is, how do we create that kind of common bond without expecting everybody to be in the military? And there's a way to do that. It's signing up for a cause that's greater than ourselves. The philosopher William James called it a way to inflame the civic temper as history has inflamed the military temper. And this is not a new idea, nor is it a partisan idea. Up until now, every administration believed in service. President Kennedy launched the Peace Corps and challenged us to ask not what the country could do for you. George H.W. Bush talked about the 1,000 points of light. President Obama expanded AmeriCorps and said that when you serve today, you connect your own unlikely story to the American story. And by the way, right here in Iowa, Congressman Dave Loebsack was a huge champion of service, and so was Tom Harkin, among others, on both sides of the aisle. The only exception I can find, actually, is the current president, who proposed killing the Corporation for Community and National Service, taking $1 billion out of it in the budget. That didn't come to pass, but that's what they proposed. And yet, at this moment, when social media and polarization are putting us in our own bubbles, it's never been more important to find a common character in our country. And service is a way to do it. It's a way to do it that offers a tremendous return on investment. Some studies say you get about $4 for every one you put into it. And that's why I believe we need to create dramatically more service year opportunities for Americans as soon as they finish high school. Now, I picked Iowa to lay out this proposal because this is a state that punches above its weight class when it comes to service. 4 in 10 Iowans report volunteering in their community. One study found that Iowa was in the top 5 in the country for volunteerism. Do we have anybody who's been part of a volunteer program, AmeriCorps, Peace Corps, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, something in your community? Raise your hand, be proud, be recognized. And I bet you learned a lot about yourself and a lot about your country when you did it. So whether it's an AmeriCorps team rebuilding communities after floods, or the communities that welcomed more than 18,000 refugees resettling in Iowa, or the work that's going on to help third graders read right here in Sioux City. For Iowans, service is bedrock. Service is in your souls, and I want to make that a norm all across America. So today, I'm proud to announce a new call for service with 3 major steps. 1, we propose to immediately triple paid service opportunities, to bring them to 250,000 opportunities targeted toward America's high school graduates, community college, and vocational students. These are paid positions with the added benefit of job training, hiring preferences, and qualifying for public service loan forgiveness. Second, oh man, that's pretty good too. Second, we recognize that communities are where so much problem solving happens. And so I believe the federal government should support communities coming up with their own service opportunities, with competitive grants that go to cities, towns, counties, communities, and regions that want to create a whole ecosystem of service around whatever issues matter most in your community. That's step 2, and that's what our federal government ought to be ready to do. And third, I believe by 2026, when we're going to have a very big 4th of July, because it's the 250th birthday of this country, that by then, we can invest so that 1 million high school graduates have an opportunity for a full year of service to their community and to their country. Now, doing that will require resources, it will require organization, and I propose we set up a chief service officer who will have direct access to my office. And I think when we do that, we will find not only that a lot of work gets done, but that Americans come closer together. There's scripture that says, "Whom shall I send and who will go for us?" And Isaiah says, "Here I am, send me." This is for everybody who has said, "Here I am, send me." And I know there are a lot of people here who would take advantage of those opportunities. Ask yourself, would you be part of a community health corps that would focus on those struggling with addiction, mental health, or substance use issues? Sounds like we got some takers. How about an intergenerational corps to provide caregiving to our nation's seniors and learn from them while you do? How about a climate corps to be first responders in the wake of the last disaster and build resilience to help prevent the next one? Sounds like we got some takers. There's a reason why the Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, the military, they're all turning away far more people than they can accept. The desire to serve, the hunger to be part of something bigger than yourself is already alive and well. We just got to make sure we rise to meet it. So we're going to try to model that in our own campaign. We're going to make a point of meeting with local service leaders on our campaign stops. And next month, we'll be calling on all of our supporters in every state to join us in a national day of service to truly make that part of the ethic of our campaign. I hope you join us. We'll know we've succeeded when the first question you get for a young person applying for a job or applying to college is not just where are you from, but where did you serve? What was it like? Who did you meet? And what did you learn? And when we do that, when we bring together Americans from every walk of life, we will be repairing the fabric of our nation. We can shape a whole new generation of American youth, bound by mutual service, aware of common values that bind us as Americans, not agreeing on everything, but having that common touchstone that so many veterans have, but that you shouldn't have to go to war to experience. So tomorrow, as we celebrate the birth of American democracy, I'm looking forward to seeing how it's done Iowa style. And I think it's an opportunity to think about what really does make us great. Not so much our independence, but our interdependence. That idea that for all our differences of race and religion and region and politics, all of our disagreements out of many, we are one. That's patriotism. It's not the size of our military budget. It's not the tanks the president wants to roll down a street in Washington. It is what lives in the hearts of people committed to a greater cause than themselves. When a tornado went through Marshalltown, all the Habitat for Humanity volunteers came from all across the state. One of them said, "This is what Iowans do. We stand up for each other when the chips are down." It's what Iowans do. It's what Americans do. And seeing that spirit of service, I am optimistic for our future. So, Sioux City, are you ready to answer the call to serve? And are you ready to take our deepest values and build them into a different kind of politics in our time? Are you ready to mobilize not just to win the next election, but to win the next era in American life? And I feel pretty good about our future. Let's have a conversation. I don't want to talk at you the whole time. I'm thankful that you're here. I know it's a little warm, so I appreciate the endurance that this represents. We got some microphones going around. I'd love to answer any questions, whether it's about this or anything else that's on your mind.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Mayor Pete. My name is Rachel, and I'm with the Iowa States for Service Coalition. So thank you for your service and also your support of AmeriCorps and elevating a conversation about national service. I have a comment and then a few questions about your national service plan. This year, AmeriCorps is a national service program. It's celebrating its 25th anniversary, and over 1 million Americans have already served as AmeriCorps members. Here in Iowa, we have over 1,400 AmeriCorps members, over 5,000 Senior Corps volunteers, and 90,000 volunteers serving in the Volunteer Generation Fund and mentoring programs, like we heard about before, all managed through Volunteer Iowa, the state commission here. While these numbers are impressive, they are addressing only a small fraction of the need here in Iowa and engaging a small percentage of Iowans that could serve. As you know, AmeriCorps is a complex federal program, and it can be hard for smaller communities like Sioux City and those more rural communities surrounding to really access those resources. How will your plan build off the existing infrastructure by working with state and local governments? And also, through your plan, will national service be accessible to all Iowans that want to serve? And how will it be accessible to all types of Iowa communities? Thank
Fantastic.
you.
First of all, thanks for your advocacy on this issue. And there's a lot there. Let me start with what you're saying about the local piece, because I think this is really important. Different communities have different needs, and they organize themselves in different ways. And that's why I think we not only need to provide the funding to allow more people to serve in established programs like Peace Corps or AmeriCorps, we also ought to recognize that a lot of communities are going to come up with their own solutions. That's where the competitive grant program comes in. So in addition to the federal match that will go to the kinds of programs we've already got, AmeriCorps is a good example. We're using that in South Bend to help weatherize homes. It makes it possible for seniors to afford to live in their homes more, and it makes us more sustainable for climate. But we want to challenge American communities to devise their own systems for service. And then we will, through that competitive grant process, support them and circulate the ideas and what they learn from each other, bring them together from time to time to share those best practices. I'm also really glad you mentioned the importance of making it possible for all Iowans, all Americans to contribute. Because this is also something we all need. It's not only to be supported, but to be given a chance to support others. This is a huge issue for veterans reintegration. It's why things like Team Rubicon are such remarkable organizations. They don't go to a veteran and say, I'm going to just hand something to you. They say, I still need your help. America still needs your help, even if you're out of uniform. And that community and identity and purpose that you build up, that is one of the rewards of service. We also want the positions to be paid. But this reward is as meaningful or more in so many cases. And so that will be something that will be given given points in the competitive grant system to show that it is an inclusive program that makes it possible for different people to serve. But it's also why we got to put some funding behind this. For far too many, service is kind of a luxury. And we got to make this a universal norm, which means it has to be available to everybody who wants to serve, no matter their backgrounds, abilities, or means. Thank you. Let's see. Question on this side? Hi.
Hello, my name's Langston Sain, and so I'm looking forward to later in my life possibly serving. And you mentioned student loan forgiveness. I wonder if you could elaborate a bit more on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Pretty cool to already be thinking about service at his age, isn't it? So, well, first of all, by the time you're applying for college, I'm hoping it'll be dramatically more affordable, and we got a separate set of plans on that. So that a lot of students who today carry debt wouldn't even have debt coming out of college. But for those who would, we want to make sure that we reward public service with a way to reduce or eliminate your debt based on how much you've served. Now, there's a program for that now. It's called Public Service Loan Forgiveness. But the way it works, it's really hard to actually use the benefits. And so one of the things we want to do with this service program is make sure that your service here qualifies for that benefit so that you can use it toward paying down your debt. And there ought to be hiring preference. So if you are applying for a job later and you've been in one of these service programs, you get extra points for that when you're applying for a job, and that'll help you boost your income too. So check with me once you're finishing your service year, and we'll see whether we delivered on that. But I'm glad you're already thinking about it. Thank you. All right. Come back to this side. Right here in front, sir. Mike will come right to you.
Afghanistan.
Yes, sir.
When are we getting out?
Yeah. So when I left in 2014, I thought I was one of the last troops turning out the lights. I thought it was ending then. 5 years later, we're still there. And it's clear that there's not a very strong plan on how to get out. We've got to go. We've got to put an end to endless war. And that means a mission that is not defined as being the provider of full peace and prosperity there. We can't be responsible for that. What we should do is, as we leave, try not to do anything that would undermine the Afghan government. And I am worried that we're talking to the Taliban, we're not talking to the government that was elected there. But at the end of the day, the Afghans have to stand on their 2 feet. Now, one of the things you learn from going, this is 2019. You're almost old enough to enlist. You could enlist today and not have been born on 9/11. And the lesson from that is that when you get into one of these conflicts, it is extremely hard to get out, which is why the best thing we can do to end endless war is not to get into one in the first place if it can be avoided. And it's why we've got to get off the warpath with Iran. All right. Right up front. Love the shirt, by the way.
So my name's Helena. I'm a high school student from Nebraska.
Great.
My question is, ever since the Parkland shooting, I've been really scared to go to school or really any public place. What is your plan to fix the gun control issue that we're having?
Well, thanks for raising that. And, one of the things that's changing the conversation is people your age looking elected officials dead in the eye and saying, what are you going to do to keep us safe? Because you have a kind of moral authority that leaves the likes of the NRA in the dust. So keep raising your voice. Now, the crazy thing about this issue is there's a lot of stuff Americans agree on doing right now. We start with universal background checks. Most Americans agree, most Republicans agree, most gun owners agree. We just can't get most members of Congress to agree. It's one of the reasons why I think we need to do things like that, redistricting, reform, money in politics, and the rest of it. If there's that much daylight between the American people and the American Congress, something's twisted in our democracy. But the bottom line is we will fight, I will fight, for universal background checks, number one. Number two, we need red flag laws. So when somebody is a danger to themselves or others, we make it harder for them to get a weapon, or for that matter, ammunition. We got to disarm domestic abusers and catch mental health issues before they turn lethal. So that's number two. And number three, having trained on a lot of weapons of war when I was in the military, I got to tell you, with all respect for self-defense and hunting and the rest of it, there are weapons of war that simply do not belong in American neighborhoods in peacetime. But I really think we can deliver that change if we're ready to see the political will from the White House and to remind constituents when their members of Congress are ignoring them, because we've gone far too long. Will this prevent every tragedy? Maybe not, but it will save thousands and thousands of lives. And shame on us if we don't deliver it. Also, for those who can't see, I love the T-shirt says we should all be feminists. And at a moment like this, it is especially important, I think, for men to step up and be feminists too. So thanks for the reminder. All right. Let's see. Make sure we're responding to the back. Right there, green shirt.
All right. Hello. If elected president, it's quite likely that you will be facing a Republican majority in the Senate. How do you plan on working in a bipartisan way with Leader McConnell to appoint Supreme Court justices and get legislation through?
So there's two ways of looking at this. The first is, in that scenario, we've got to deal with it. I wouldn't get very far as a mayor in Indiana if I didn't know how to work with Republicans. I'm on my third Republican governor. We got a legislature so Republican that the Democrats don't even have to show up for them to do business. They're not needed for a quorum. And so what I've found works is not to pretend to be more conservative than I am, but to work consistently with the values that motivate me, be very transparent about them, but also look at areas where there's agreement. And again, some of these areas of agreement might surprise you. Gun safety is one of them among the American people, not just not among the American Congress. By the way, immigration is another one. Most Americans are for a comprehensive bipartisan reform of the immigration system. It's Washington that can't get it done. So I think we've lost a lot of our illusions about good faith among the Senate Republicans. Do you see where Mitch McConnell said if there was a nominee in 2020, they'd go ahead and vote on it, even though in 2016 they said it was morally wrong to do it in an election year? They're not even pretending to be working in good faith anymore, right? And so that brings me to by far the best solution to the very serious and very real issue that you raised, which is to make sure that there's not a Republican Senate majority. And that means having a candidate with coattails, and it means winning. All right. Dead center, blue shirt, if we can get a mic to you. Thanks to our mic runners, by the way. I know we got you moving around a lot.
Thank you. Okay, hi, Pete, first of all.
Hi.
I am from Syracuse, Indiana.
All right.
Beautiful Lake Wawasee.
Yeah.
And when you mentioned the Electoral College, I would like you to speak just a little bit more on that, because I have experience being a token Democrat in a Republican small town, but also I've experienced living in the heartland and wanting to make sure that our voice and our vote matters. Now I live in Nebraska, which has a modified electoral vote.
Yeah.
And I am basically just wondering your justification for comments such as completely eliminating versus modifying in a way that may or may not actually be more representative of people in small rural towns and people in huge cities.
Right. So here's the way I look at it. The Electoral College as we have it now doesn't really lift up small communities or big communities. It just lifts up certain communities, right? So in Indiana, most years, our electoral votes don't matter, so nobody ever talks to us because we're a very conservative state. In Illinois, it's the same thing because they're reliably Democratic. Small states from Wyoming to Rhode Island are penalized. Big states from California to Texas are penalized. It's got nothing to do with how big or how small you are, how rural or how urban you are. It just has to do with whether you happen to be one of the handful of states that benefits by that math. And I think that if we go by the very simple principle, I think Nebraska is a step in the right direction, by the way. It's better than what we got now. But at risk of sounding simplistic, I think the fairest way to deal with this is just to say everybody's vote and voice counts exactly the same. That way somebody's got to care about your vote, even if you're a lonely Democrat living in a conservative area, or vice versa. Your vote still matters because it counts toward the total. We got to speak to you wherever you are in this country, whatever kind of community you live in, whatever your life experience, instead of writing off entire states because they don't fit into that math. So that's the way I think of it, that we just go with one person, one vote, and stop trying to put a thumb on the scale here and a thumb on the scale there. There's more than enough of that in the Senate, and that makes sure small states get privileged more than kind of the average. But for the rest of it, I just say, let's all count the same. Thanks. All right, make sure we get this side here. Right here, red shirt. Hi.
Hi, my name is Margene Nichols, and I'm part of SCAN, which means Save the Children Action Network. A couple of questions I have is on early education. As a president, what actions would you take to ensure that all families can afford child care and early education so children are prepared to enter school and parents can work?
Thank you. So, two big things that we need, and I was talking to somebody just recently on the campaign trail who was describing, young working couple, and she did the math. They both work, so her kid's in childcare, and what she realized is the childcare bill is consuming everything that she earns at work. She's basically working in order to be able to afford to be working, and that's no way to support working families in this country. So there's two things we've got to do. The first is to support people in being able to afford child care. And that's where tax credits that can recognize when somebody's in that situation and let them decide how best to deploy those dollars is the right way to go, in my view. The second thing we got to do is deliver quality pre-kindergarten child care for every American, and I think we can do it. It's not cheap, but there is a huge return on investment. It's one of the best things that can pay for itself. We were told falsely that a tax cut for the wealthiest would pay for itself. We've run this experiment lots and lots of times. Turns out it just isn't true. It's kind of like what they say about communism. Sounds good in theory, doesn't work in practice. That's true of supply-side economics too. But there are investments you can make, expenditures you can make that pay back. And one of them is investing in early childhood education, because you have better outcomes, longer life, long earnings. You even see fewer people go into prison when they've had the benefit of early childhood education. And communities won't be able to do it without federal support, so there needs to be federal funding to help local communities make that a reality. All right. Let's go right here on the aisle.
Thank you for taking my question. My name is Pat Boggs, and I have a health care concern. I am a voice for the Alzheimer's Association, a voice for the AIM, and a voice for the 5.8 million Americans who deal with dementia and their loved ones. My question is, as president, do you have a plan to help promote caregivers and how to deal with the issue of Alzheimer's and other related dementias?
Yes, and thank you. Thank you for being a voice. I don't know, Pat, if this has impacted, how this has impacted you, but I think so many of us, is it parent? Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for channeling, obviously, what is such a cruel disease and making that, making yourself a light to others through that not everybody has the strength to do that, and that's really important. So thank you. And I believe there are two categories of things we got to do. One of them is research on this disease, because I've got to believe that America can tackle Alzheimer's if we adequately fund research. So CDC, NIH, and other institutions with federal support and support into the universities should see an expansion in the funding that goes in to dealing with the disease that, as you said, touches so many, and by the way, costs us so much as a country. The human cost and the cost that we can count up in dollars and cents. So we've got to do that. Now, in order to do that, it's going to be important to have a white line will be that believes in science, that doesn't view it as political stuff, that believes it. Now, the other side of the equation that you mentioned is supporting caregivers. And I think this ties into something a little bit deeper, which is there's a lot of talk about working people, supporting working people, as we all want to do. But I think our definition of work is a little bit narrow. If it's work that you get a W-2 or a 1099 for, we call it work, and we honor it in a certain way. But I think all of us would agree that caregiving is work. It happens in a home. You don't get paid for it, but it's work. We'll be sharing more on this later this summer, but just to give you a preview, I believe when we provide support through our tax code for working people, we need a wider imagination about what that actually means. And it should be expanded to include the work of parents and the work of those who are taking care of parents and loved ones, because that's work too, and the federal government should be able to recognize that. Where'd our mic go? We got one right behind you on the doorpost there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hi, I'm Abby LaFleur. I'm a college student, and I think that one issue that people my age might think is the biggest is climate change. And so I guess I'm just wondering, what specific legislative action do you plan to take to tackle that issue?
Well, thanks, Abby. Several specific things that we know we've got to do. And some of them get talked about a lot, and some of them don't. Let's start with the ones that you hear a lot about, and I just want to get it on the record that I support them. One of them is we need a carbon price and dividend. We got to do it in order for our economy to have the right kind of rewards for us to do the right thing, to capture the true cost of the choices we make every day. Now, everybody's afraid of that because another word for carbon price is tax, and you're not supposed to use the T word when you're running for office. But we could rebate out. The point of the carbon tax is not to take money out of the economy. It's to make sure that prices reflect the true cost of things that put a lot of carbon into the atmosphere. And that means that we can put that money right back into the economy. So I would propose that the carbon tax or price include a dividend that distributes all of it right back out to the American people, and do it in a progressive way so that most of us are made more than whole. In that way, it can also help empower a lot of Americans, and I think it helps some of the political allergies to this very necessary policy go away. That's just one thing we got to do. Another thing we got to do is increased research with federal backing on energy storage, carbon storage, and renewable energy. We should probably at least quadruple it to about $24 billion a year. It's important enough that we ought to be doing it, and there's without federal backing to get that research done. So that's another one. Now, these are the kind of things you hear about a lot. I think we pretty much agree on that among Democrats. A couple of things for some reason you don't hear about as much. One of them is the importance of the local. So there's a lot of cities that have come together, frustrated that our, from around the world, not just around America, frustrated that our national governments are not doing enough. And basically we realize, between us, we got so many of the world's population and so much of the world's economy that if we met these goals, we would be halfway there. And so South Bend, even though Washington got out of the Paris Accord, South Bend said we're still in. We ought to support local community problem solving for sustainability. And what I would do, in addition to rejoining the Paris Accords right away, is I would follow that up with a Pittsburgh summit right here on American soil that brings together communities and states and looks at how the federal government can support them in their actions on sustainability at the local issue, local level. Last policy I want to mention is that we've got to invite rural America to be part of the solution. I think right now a lot of folks in rural America feel like we're telling them they're bad because we care about climate change, when actually, if you look at things like soil management, there's a lot of research that suggests that the capacity of the world's soil to hold carbon is as much as the carbon that gets put into the atmosphere by the entire global transportation sector, if we could just figure out how to do it. That's just one example of how, through soil management and other sustainable practices in rural America, we could be finding a lot of the solutions there. And I think that's necessary because this can't be an issue that pits one part of America against another. We've all got to gain by dealing with it. And this is no longer an issue that we have the luxury of debating whether it's real. If you're still debating whether it's real, we literally don't have time to argue with you. And we've seen it in Iowa, we've seen it in Indiana. I have had to activate the Emergency Operations Center of my city twice in 2 years. The first time was for a 1,000-year flood, and the second time was for a 500-year flood. Now, either I'm running some ridiculous odds, or things are changing around us. We know this. We've got to adapt, and we've got to act fast to make sure it doesn't get worse. And much like the issue of gun violence, I got to tell you, the moral authority of a new generation saying, hey, our lives, our life opportunities are going to depend on whether you folks in power figure this out. Your activism is going to be what makes the difference between this election and the last election, where, shockingly, the number of climate change questions in the presidential debates was 0. That's not going to happen again, and it's because of people like you. All right. Sounds like we got time for one more. And, a lot of hands are up. Right here in the purple shirt, if you can get there. Yep.
My name is Chris, and I'm from Nebraska. It's likely when our unicameral meets again for the next session that they'll bring a bill similar to Georgia and Alabama for an abortion ban. And I'm just curious on what your plan is to make sure Roe v. Wade stays a law and where you stand on appealing the Hyde Amendment.
Yeah. First of all, I believe the Hyde Amendment's got to go. And more broadly, unfortunately, what we're seeing is they're tearing up what amounts to an American agreement. Obviously, this is a tough issue for a lot of people. It's a tough issue where I'm the mayor of South Bend, Indiana. Believe the Democratic mayor of the pro-choice Democratic mayor of South Bend, Indiana. Right? It's tough. People I know, people I love, people who support me, don't see the issue the way I see it. But the way I see it is that this is one of the most challenging decisions that a woman can face. And it is challenging if she faces it on her own. It is challenging, but perhaps made better if she recruits the advice and support of people in her life, religious guidance, if that's how she sees the world, medical guidance for sure. But what doesn't make that decision any better, medically or morally, is for the government to come in and tell her what she ought to do. So you can count on me to have that philosophy reflected in my judicial appointments. You can count on me to have that reflected in my legislative agenda. And you can count on me to continue to believe that it's twice as important right now for men to be standing with women and standing for reproductive rights. So, again, I want to thank you. We're going to be in Iowa an awful lot over the coming months. Looking forward to getting to know you, hoping to earn your vote, hoping to earn your support, hoping that you'll tell friends about our message. And the one thing I want to leave you with is that I still believe this is a season for us to have an awful lot of hope about our country. I know it's tough to talk about things like hope at a moment when we got such bleakness and divisiveness emanating from our capital. That show I was talking about, whether you think of it as a horror show or a reality show or a game show or a couple unrepeatable words also come to mind. But we're not going to go on that show. If you're playing his game, you're losing. If you're talking about him, we're not talking about you. So we're going to change the channel. And I need your help to do it. But I'm telling you, running for office is an act of hope. Supporting somebody running for office is an act of hope. Sweating in a high school gym on a very warm day is an act of hope, so you give me hope. And I'm so thankful that you find it worthwhile, that you find it worth being involved, that you know how much this matters. Can I count on you to then with you on my side, I think I can't lose. I can't wait to see you every step of the way, and I'll see you on the trail. Thank you for your support. Thank you for everything you bring to this. I can't thank you enough. Thank you.